Good morning. Welcome to Sativa Segment, episode 34. It's been a while. I took about a month and a half hiatus, but now I'm back. Today we have a foreign guest, but before we get there, I would like to say that this episode is fueled by Ritter Spencer Cheng. It's a local law firm here in Dallas, Texas, with two other offices in two other states. It's a full service business law firm. And if you want to find out a little bit more about it, just look online, ritterspencercheng.com. Harrison, you flew all the way from Canada.
Yep, I did.
What a trek. Do you like our Canadian themed color just for you?
It's amazing.
The red maple leaf thing.
I love it. Have you done the red color before?
You know, very rare.
Very rare.
I typically go with the green, given the color, the subject matter. And I've gone with the blue a few times and the purple.
We could have done blue. I mean, blue is the color of the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Toronto Blue Jays.
That's true.
The Blue Jays are in the running now for the World Series. Well, hopefully by the time this episode airs, they will be in the final series for the World Series.
Are you a Blue Jays fan?
Oh, you have to be, at least right now with how it's doing there. It's
but they've always historically had a pretty good team.
Well, we won in 92 and then we won in 93. And then since then, we've sort of had a drought. And the last time we made it to the second round, I believe, was 2016. So
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. Because you guys were here. Actually, I went to that game when they played against the Rangers.
Oh yeah. That's funny.
So, well, you're a Canadian lawyer and you're in Toronto. And through our conversations, we talked about your practice and how you kind of got into it. But just for the purposes of this conversation and educating the public and the viewers that's watching this. How did you get into it? How did you fall into the cannabis industry, and how did you start representing cannabis clients?
Yeah, so I was always fascinated with the law. In high school, I took law courses, and I was always fascinated by the charter cases. So in Canada, we call the Constitution the charter. And I was really fascinated by the fact that lawyers could go to court, make arguments on behalf of disadvantaged people, and change the law through advocacy. That was really cool to me. And I eventually applied to University of Guelph for my undergrad degree. Criminal Justice and Public Policy was the name of the program, the major. And it wasn't a dedicated department, but it was, you were supposed to take courses from different departments to make up the major. And it was just so fascinating to me. So I ran with it and applied to Osgoode Hall Law School in Toronto. In my entrance essay, I wrote about how I found it fascinating that they tenured this professor named Alan Young, who stood up for people who have stood up for those who were charged with what he called consensual crimes. So gambling, sex workers, medical cannabis patients. These are people that not all lawyers may want to represent. And these are people that, Alan, as far as I could tell, was not particularly part of those communities, but he wanted to stand up for disadvantaged people. So I wrote about how it was, I was fascinated by that. And long story short, they put me in his first year crim class, ended up volunteering for him, spending half my time.
Were you like a TA?
Not a TA, but I was. He had an innocence. He was the director of the Innocence Project at Osgoode Hall.
Oh, I was part of that when I was in law school.
Yeah, very fascinating. Yeah. And he also defended people charged with cannabis-related offenses, and would generally be a thorn in the side of the government challenging laws. And so he carved out a unique role for me where half my time was spent in Innocence Project and half my time was spent with him on the cannabis constitutional cases. And I don't practice much litigation, but I've carried that spirit on. I do mostly solicitor work. And it's been such a fascinating journey, especially because I started practicing open my own firm right when I got called to the bar.
Now, you were, and that's another term, the Canadian term "call to the bar." I haven't heard that before until we spoke. I think it was around 18 or 17 when Canada legalized, wasn't it?
Cannabis, yes.
Yeah. So it was around 17 or 18 when Canada legalized cannabis. So what was that like as you were transitioning into being a lawyer and Canada opening up doors like that?
Yeah, so that was October 17, 2018.
Okay.
Although it was obviously discussed and the bill was passed ahead of that time. And it was, I could say it's the Wild West. The true Wild West was before when it wasn't legal at all. But essentially...
so how did that, I mean, it was decriminalized, wasn't it? And then they legalized. Was that the case?
It was not actually decriminalized at all.
Okay.
It was just very, very highly tolerated
And
in
so
most places.
there wasn't very much enforcement by law.
There was very little enforcement when it comes to simple possession.
Yeah.
Now, if you were, if you were a youth consuming, they would probably take it away from you. If you were possessing for the purpose of trafficking, if you're cultivating, those are sorts of things that certainly could land you in trouble. And but it was legal for medical purposes. There was depending on who you ask, robust medical cannabis framework, where as a medical patient, you could apply to grow plants for yourself or designate someone to grow for you, depending on the amount of grams per day you were prescribed. And there's now, unfortunately, some diversion as part of that program. Health Canada has been trying to clamp down on that. And so in around 2014, after medical cannabis was already legal, they instituted a new framework that an additional pathway that allowed patients to send their medical documents, essentially prescriptions from a doctor, to a commercial licensed seller of cannabis, medical cannabis. But it was sent to you through parcel. And so even now to this day, if you're a medical patient and you want to participate in that system, you get it through Canada Post. You have to wait. Whereas non-medical cannabis, you can just walk to the store. So we still have some work to do, but that's to say that the seeds were planted a while ago, and those commercial medical cannabis producers and sellers are now, they were well positioned to produce for the rec market.
Okay. And during our conversations, you had a term called, what was it? Collaborative federalism?
Collaborative federalism.
And of course, the Canadian system, you call them provinces. So how does the federal government, the Canadian federal government, collaborate with the provinces? How does that work?
Yeah, so there are some areas that are the exclusive jurisdiction of the feds. So that includes...
Oh, even within the provinces?
Even within the provinces, yes. So that's not the collaborative part, or that's the least collaborative part of it.
Doesn't sound very collaborative.
So there are certain matters that are federal jurisdiction, and it all sort of emanates from the federal statute, which is the Cannabis Act, and so that dictates essentially that the feds control the production; they regulate the production and the labeling. And the provinces dictate how the retail framework is going to be. And there's some overlap because both the provinces and the feds can have laws with respect to promotion, how and to what extent they can be sold. And certainly there can be provincial laws that are added on top of the federal laws if they want to make things stricter. But generally, when it comes to production and packaging and what needs to be on the label, that's all handled federally. Retail is primarily the provinces. Each province decides, is it sold by a privately run store? Is it sold by a publicly run agency? Can those outlets sell online? Those sorts of matters. And then promotion is a good example where there may be rules on both levels, and you need to comply, obviously, with both of them.
So what type of conflict of law issues come up? And I guess what's going through my mind is it sounds like on the retail level it's controlled by the provinces, but do you have to have like a dual licensing framework and get approval by both the feds and on the province side?
So to produce, that is a federal license.
To grow, to cultivate.
To cultivate,
Yeah.
as well as to package it. So to transform it into another form, such as rosin or concentrate,
Okay.
or even just to package the dried cannabis into a final consumer bottle, that requires what's called a processing license. And then also federally, if you want to sell to patients, that's only federally that's federally regulated. So, and generally, if you have a medical sales license, you're already a producer. It allows you to vertically integrate to some extent. But when it comes to retail non-medical sales, that is a provincial license. And that is each province dictates that. Some provinces have rules that are against a vertical integration in the sense of a producer can't have a retail store, or they can, but it has to be through a subsidiary, or it can't be named the same as the producer. And in terms of conflict of laws, there was a Supreme Court case last year. I believe it was the first and only so far Supreme Court case to talk about legalization. And essentially, it was a challenge of Quebec's law, Quebec's prohibition on the cultivation of cannabis. So the Cannabis Act legalized adults growing up to 4 plants at home, up to a maximum of 4 per resident. So if you have multiple people living there, you can't sort of stack them up. And
what a way to circumvent that rule, right?
well, look, they in the draft legislation, they were going to make it so that the plants could only be 100 centimeters tall. And so people were joking, police are going to have tape measures now.
Yeah.
Luckily, they got rid of that. So sometimes if you go to people's backyards and they like to cultivate cannabis, but they can only cultivate 4, you see that those are very large. So the Supreme Court case essentially was, I'm not sure who the applicants were, but essentially someone was challenging the Quebec law because federally there was no prohibition on growing up to 4 plants, as long as it's by an adult and residents, et cetera. But the Quebec law prohibited it. And criminal law is an exclusive jurisdiction of the federal government. And so...
So the provinces, they don't have jurisdiction over criminal offenses?
They cannot enact criminal offenses.
Wow, that's wild.
Whereas in the U.S. it's different.
Well, I mean, you can have both, right?
Exactly.
You can have, the FBI and the DEA.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, you can have felonies that are enacted by the state, or
the state attorney general's office, or even at the local level with municipal police.
Yeah, and so essentially, how the Supreme Court resolved this was the Cannabis Act doesn't say you can do something. It just says you can't do something. So it says you can't grow more than 4 plants. So it's not giving you a positive right. It's saying you can't do these things. And therefore, it stands to logic that the provinces can put limits on that. And also, there's this long history of case law saying, well, if it is not, if essentially the law is not meant to punish people, but is instead meant to uphold public health and safety, then it's within the province's jurisdiction and it is not criminal law, which I know sort of sounds like a cop-out. You could just say anything is, it's not a criminal law, even though there is a potential imprisonment for provincial offenses. It's sort of seems like it's a criminal offense, but so the court sided with Quebec. Manitoba is the only other province that prohibits home growing, and so that's actually being changed in Manitoba. But Quebec is a very interesting province. We'll just say that, and so
isn't it primarily French speaking?
Oh yes, absolutely. And Quebec does some things very interestingly when it comes to cannabis. So they're the only province where you have to be 21 or up to purchase cannabis.
Okay. Are the others, what is it, 19?
It's 19 everywhere else except Alberta, which is 18. And also the edibles in Quebec can't be appealing to youth in the sense that they don't allow, they can't, products should not be appealing to youth no matter where in Canada. But in terms of Quebec, the province there has banned the sale of chocolates and gummies. So you have some very interesting non-appealing edible products, like cauliflower bites and snack mix and trail mix, and so edibles like that that maybe aren't appealing to youth and probably aren't appealing to most adults, but that's how it is there.
Wow, sounds interesting that they have it sounds like they have a more restrictive framework there.
So they have a more restrictive framework, and if that issue came to the Supreme Court, it would probably be decided the same. Oh, it's not, criminal. They're trying to uphold, especially with Quebec. I mean, the justice system is sort of deferential to what the province wants to do there. They're sort of seen as a nation within a nation. But that's where you can see
Didn't they try splitting from Canada at one point?
They did. I think they were 0.1 or 0.2% away from splitting in terms of the referendum that they had. They had 2 referendums.
So it sounds like the framework is on the federal level. It controls the medical. It controls the cultivation. The processing, the packaging. It sounds like pretty much everything, with minus the retail.
Minus the retail. Yeah, exactly.
Which is it's a very big contrast to the U.S., right? In that obviously in the U.S. it's federally illegal. So because it's federally illegal, there's so many restrictions on a federal level. So aside from criminal enforcement actions or putting restrictions of what you can't do or what your limitations are as a business, such as 280E under the IRS code, everything else is pretty much controlled by the state, right? How it's packaged, how it's cultivated, how it's sold, etc. So let's shift our gears a little bit away from adult use and medical use. Of course, here in Texas, we have a burgeoning market in the hemp consumable goods industry, ranging from gummies to beverages, etc. And you've seen it. It's the HHCs, the THC VPNOs, and the Delta 8. That's not allowed in Canada, or maybe it's a. My understanding is that it conflicts with the current legal market, doesn't it? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So if it's not produced by the cannabis plant, it's not found in the cannabis plant, then technically it's not controlled by the Cannabis Act. So the Cannabis Act, let's say it's a semi-synthetic. If it is found naturally in cannabis,
like THCO is a synthetic because it's not naturally occurring in the plant.
Yeah, so that would generally not be covered by the Cannabis Act. Although it depends if it can be found in the plant. I don't know. I don't. Every day they're finding different cannabinoids.
Or at least that's our position, according to DEA, that THCO it's not naturally occurring.
Right.
I believe HHC is it's not naturally occurring as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because it depends on how you interpret
naturally occurring.
Well, essentially Schedule 1 of the Cannabis Act, because it's supposed to capture what's found in the plant, what's produced by the plant. And so you could argue, well, if it's a semi-synthetic, is it produced by the plant? So I think that's open for interpretation. But nevertheless, we don't have many, if at all, any of these synthetics or semi-synthetic cannabinoids, because we already have THC.
Yeah.
So we have a big market for THC, obviously a big market for CBD. We also have a burgeoning market for CBG and CBN. And that's, those are essentially the cannabinoids of choice in Canada. We don't have a intoxicating hemp market. Some people here may call it a loophole, but people like to consume cannabis in one way or the other. And if you're going to do it, why not do it in the most compliant fashion? If you're going to be an operator, if you're going to be a consumer, you don't want to be breaking the law.
So who's buying the CBG and CBNs? I'm curious.
So that those are consumers. And so even though, the storefronts in Canada are non-medical, and in fact, if you are a medical patient and you want to get it through the quote unquote medical framework, and you want to order it from a seller, you actually have to get it by parcel by Canada Post. Okay. These storefronts, although they're non-medical, you of course still have folks go there that would otherwise be medical patients, or that are taking it for a dual purpose of wellness and wanting to unwind. Right where that line is, it's difficult to tell, and that's what's so good about cannabis is it can be a medicine, it can be recreational. It depends on the person and the time of day. Right. And so you're seeing a lot of mixed products now, balanced products. 1-to-1 CBD, THC, obviously, and the CBG and the CBN are increasingly becoming large segments. I mean, I think that eventually, I made a prediction on LinkedIn that out of between CBG and CBD, I think CBG is actually going to become more popular, even though it's not as abundant in the plant, at least with the cultivars that we have.
No, why do you think it's going to be more popular?
I feel like CBG is closer to what people were hyping up CBD to be. CBD was hyped up to be this cure-all, and I certainly don't think either cannabinoid is a cure-all. They can certainly be helpful, but I think from my experience, CBG it can be more helpful when it comes to certain types of anxiety. Okay. And so, and it depends on the person.
Is it selling pretty well in Canada?
CBG? The CBG is selling well. Most of the CBG products are balanced or mixed, so they have THC and CBG, and so that seems to be the sweet spot. But
got to create that entourage effect,
right? Exactly. But there are products now. There's vapes that are just CBG and CBD, but those are smaller parts of the market. But those are the parts of the market that are increasing fastest. Are products with those cannabinoids, as well as pre-rolls are becoming big, and infused pre-rolls. We love our IPRs there, as they're called.
Tell me about the storage. You had mentioned that there are no limitations on storage for personal use, or is that the case?
So federally, there is no private possession limit. So as an individual, if you're possessing cannabis for your own purposes, not to distribute to anyone else, there is no limit, at least federally, as to how much cannabis you can possess in a private place. So you could have a wine cellar of weed. That was what I was telling media outlets when it was becoming legal. Like, hey, we don't have a limit. I think we're the only country that doesn't have a private limit. We have a public.
So if I have a basement,
and
it's a big basement, I can set up LED lights and grow as much of that stuff for myself, personal use, as I can.
Well, no, the number of plants you can have is limited to four per person to a maximum of 4 per house. But the amount of cannabis you can store, if it's just for yourself, there's no limit to that. Yeah.
So let's say if I have 4 plants, and I grow, and it grows really well, and of course, you harvest your buds, and maybe you have a drying process, whatever that process is. I'm not familiar with it. And you just never use it, but you keep storing it. You keep stacking. And after a year, you have, a couple kilos underneath your bed. That's okay.
If it's for personal use,
right?
Yes.
For your personal use,
yes. Yeah. Now look, law enforcement could always say, "Oh, there were indicia of trafficking," right? Yeah. So obviously, if there's,
but they would still have to come up with evidence.
They would still have to come up with, yeah. If there's people coming and going from your place all the time, and they find that suspicious, they could investigate. But obviously, they need a warrant generally to go into your house. So, but the point is, the sky hasn't fallen. You would think that, like, oh, you're removing the private possession limit, you're like hand tying the police, but they haven't come out to say we need a private possession limit. That was put in, and the sky didn't fall. And there are still issues in terms of there is still an illicit market. Although, frankly, the legal market depends on the numbers you look at, but it's well over 50% of the market is now of the cannabis consumed appears to be from the legal market. Some figures put it as high as 3 out of 4 of 75% of the cannabis is legal. And in fact, there was one Health Canada survey not too long ago that found that only 3% of cannabis consumer respondents procured their cannabis from an illegal source. I think that number is probably a bit too small. Like it's higher than that. There are still a number of folks who have not been converted to the legal market, and a big reason, or one of the reasons I should say, is edibles, because we do have a limit on the amount of THC that can be in edibles.
It was 10 grams, right?
10 milligrams of THC.
10 milligrams, yeah.
Per
10 grams, yeah.
Per container.
That's right.
And so that's per SKU, per item that you take from the store and buy it and walk out. You can buy multiple of those, right? The public possession limit is based on the mass of the how much the products weigh, as opposed to the amount of THC in it. So even though you can only have 10 milligrams per container, you could buy multiple of them at a time. And in fact, now there's been some federally, there were some tweaks made to the regulations, and so now you will see in stores they are multi-packs.
Okay.
So it's still only 10 milligrams of THC per container, and it has to be fully labeled and packaged, but you can have multiple of those containers in one bigger master container, which it doesn't really help the small producers, because consumers are expecting to get a volume discount. As well, it takes more packaging, because you have to have the individual packs that are still packaged and labeled, and a bigger master package. And, so it's not helping small producers that much, and it's multi-packs. It's not variety pack. What's in one of the immediate containers needs to be the same as the other.
Yeah.
Probably the next tweaks, if they come around to it, it's going to be variety packs. And then eventually they'll say, okay, in one immediate container, we're now going to allow 20 or 25 milligrams. And maybe they'll say, okay, 25 milligrams, but each discrete unit, each gummy can only be 5 mil. Who knows what they'll do, but there is this fear that it's not going to be politically accepted or accepted by non-cannabis consumers to have more than 10 milligrams of THC in a container. We still have issues in terms of accidental infant poisonings with cannabis, but that is by and large the illicit edibles, and obviously a big part, and some people say the entire part, is a parental responsibility matter. Just like keep it away from kids, obviously. But I think regulators are very in tune to that. They want to move slowly. We have what's called the precautionary principle, and so that's a principle in law. Well, I say we have it, but it's probably a universal thing. But especially as Canadians, we're very cautious people. And so the government has the precautionary principle, which is to say that if there is a new subject matter that is now being regulated and it wasn't before, we're going to take a very precautious approach, and then maybe over time open
That's
it
not
up.
a bad approach, though. I mean,
It isn't.
I think it's a very good approach.
Well, look, there's the diehard cannabis activists that will say, everything should be open. There should be no regulation. No one should ever be charged with any cannabis offense. But, there have definitely been struggles in the Canadian market. And, one of them, and I don't mean to get all doom and gloomy, but there is a creditor protection legislation that applies where debts are more than $5 million. So these are large insolvencies, and approximately 40% of the companies that go through that process are cannabis companies, even though, of course, cannabis companies do not make up 40% of the economy. So we are disproportionately represented in insolvencies. And, a lot of it is due to excise tax. We have this large effective excise tax. There are lots of producers on the market. We took quite a free market approach, at least to the production licensing side of things, and there are marketing restrictions. That's one of the things you see here.
And we talked about that because as we were talking about earlier, is that you do have this tax structure, but because you're not limited the same way on the federal level, you can actually take deductions beyond cost of goods. And it's a business like anything else. But you mentioned something about a $1 per gram taxation aspect of it.
Yeah. So we have what's called an excise duty. Some people would call it a sin tax. And so that is a duty, a tax that is paid by the producer, the processor that packages the cannabis. And so they pay it when it's packaged, and some parts of it when it's sold. And essentially, the tax rate on that is $1 per gram, the higher of $1 per gram, or 10% of the wholesale price. Okay. And that was on the assumption that cannabis would wholesale for $10 per gram or more. Okay. And it was never even close to that. In fact, without the excise duty, cannabis products wholesale from the processor to the provincial wholesaler for anywhere from $1 to $3-4. And so
that's a really high tax.
If you compare that to the excise, that could mean sometimes an effective 100% excise tax, and that's on top of the sales tax that's applied to every goods and services as they're sold along the supply chain. And so that was a miscalculation by the Canadian government. And on top of that, you also have to have excise stamps. These are stamps that you have to put on each product, and it's based on where the products are sold to consumers. So it's a bit of a demand planning, I don't want to say nightmare, but it is a struggle because you have to pay this tax, but then you also have to manage all these stamps. And if you lose the stamps, it's like a $30 penalty.
So are businesses even profitable in Canada?
Businesses, there are cannabis.
I know you can take the more deductions, but it almost seems like it's offset by this excise tax structure. It's like what, 100%? How can you be profitable?
Yeah, so it can be up to 100% depending on the margins of your product, and there is a bit of a different structure when it comes to extracts. That's taxed on the milligram. And so, for example, because edibles can only be 10 milligrams per package, the effective tax rate is lower for edibles, right? Because if you were able to put more milligrams in if there was no limit, it would be higher. So it depends on what you do. It depends on if your product is considered premium by the market, and even if it's value, obviously you're it's all about volume and sales velocity at that point. But value is actually the bigger market segment. You just have to have the scale to do it.
Right.
And so is it tough to be profitable in Canadian cannabis? Absolutely. Is it impossible? No. And we're starting to see some operators that are very dialed in. They're focused. They're focused on either a specific audience segment or product segment. And whatever they do it very well. Maybe they're value cannabis. They're not known for premium, but they do it very well. They have lots of volume. They're inexpensive. They've dialed in their production costs. And then you have premium products where it's the best of the best, and people clamor for it. And you feel some sort of exclusivity by being able to get that latest drop. And so it's all about carving out your niche, doing it well, and containing costs. Even though we have marketing restrictions, you can still spend a lot of money, for example, on inter-industry promotion. So a promotion to bud tenders. So that's actually a carve out from the promotion laws. Promotion laws are generally strict, at least federally, and but there's a carve out if you're promoting to those that are authorized to sell, i.e., the provincially authorized cannabis stores, and by extension, the bud tenders.
Is that just for consumer protection for those for some of those promotional restrictions?
Yeah, generally only adults can work at cannabis stores, and so the government probably thought it was less risky for producers to be able to market to the stores rather than directly to consumers. You can still market to consumers. It's just restricted. If you're going to be doing online promotion or promotion by telecommunication, which could be, anything that uses radio waves or digital signals, you have to take reasonable steps to ensure that youth can't access the ad. And that means for radio or TV, you essentially can't have anything on radio or TV, because how can you control, or take reasonable steps to ensure a young person isn't going to watch it? I mean, you might argue, well, you just put it on late at night. But nowadays, I mean, the parents go to sleep and it's the kids that are watching TV late at night, right?
Or if they're not on TV, they're on their phones.
They're on their phone. But the thing is, at least when it comes to digital online ads, there's this recognition or this acknowledgement that that there are age gates. So if, let's say, you are a producer with a website, or you want to show your ad on a platform, if it's hidden behind a page where the person has to first indicate that they are of age, then generally the ad can be shown. I mean, there's other restrictions, can't appeal to youth, etc. Promotion that's not at the, it's limited. And in fact, as well, in-person promotion, if it's not at the point of sale, it's very strict, because in-person promotion generally can only take place in places where youth are prohibited by law, right? So it can't just be, oh, I'm a venue, I decide not to have youth in tonight. It can't be generally a bar, at least in Ontario. Right. Bars and nightclubs, most of them, a vast majority, don't have a condition on their license saying you can't let youth in. They can't make money on kids, so they don't let kids in. Well, that's not being prohibited by law. And so generally you can't have promotions in those places.
Oh,
R-rated movies used to be, you can't have youth in there, at least in Ontario. So you did see some cannabis ads before movies, but not anymore. The government there changed it so that youth can go in if they're with a parent or guardian. So now they're not prohibited by law. So that essentially leaves the inside of cannabis stores where there is promotion already anyway.
I mean, there aren't any other places.
Well, that's the struggle. They haven't harmonized the laws for in-person promotion versus telecommunication, right? If the standard is you need to take reasonable steps to ensure youth can't access the promotion when it comes to promotions via telecommunication, why isn't that the standard in person? Because if you just say it needs to be in a place prohibited where youth are prohibited by law, that's like what, inside of cannabis stores, some high risk liquor licenses like strip clubs. And so it's very difficult unless it is an event that is for those that are authorized to sell cannabis to promote the cannabis.
Yes, a lot of restrictions on the promotion marketing aspect of it. That's interesting. Okay. As we wrap up here, I know that we were talking earlier about packaging. So it's a good segue into kids, right? Because there are some limitations on coloration on packages. Yep. And you also mentioned to me about retail stores having a limitation on when they can be open, right?
Yeah.
They have to shut down by 11 p.m. Was it?
At least in Ontario, it's 11 p.m.
Okay. Yeah. Is that the case with other provinces?
With other provinces, I was actually looking at this recently. Other provinces have different rules. I think there's a couple that allow until midnight, and there might be some that allow after that. But generally, the provinces say you can't open after a certain time, and that's not generally tied to last call for bars.
I was just gonna say, is
Yeah.
it because it's the last call?
Well, the issue in Canada with cannabis consumption is that's another thing that's regulated on the provincial level is where you can consume, and most of the provinces, I think probably all the provinces, prohibit consumption of cannabis in enclosed public places or workplaces. So that's anywhere inside where people are working, or anywhere inside where people can, the public's invited to, is welcome to congregate. So that's a lot of places. So we don't have, these places where you can buy cannabis.
So there aren't consumption lounges, because there are plenty in the U.S.
Well, it's interesting because before legalization, there were consumption lounges in Canada. Bring your own.
Okay.
And there might still be a few, but a lot of them closed down. Because now, at least in Ontario, you can consume outside generally wherever you can consume tobacco. And B, the business model for you just pay an entrance fee. They weren't really making lots of money. And a part of it may actually be that even though cannabis was illegal back then, there was still a medical market, but there was no bylaw there was no municipal or provincial bylaw against indoor cannabis consumption because it was already illegal, because it was a federal criminal law, right? If they did that, it could have been seen as a province trying to put in a criminal offense. So,
but it wasn't really even getting enforced.
But it wasn't even getting that enforced, and that's why these lounges. But at least in Ontario, you can generally consume anywhere where tobacco can be consumed, but tobacco cannot be consumed in indoor public places. And as well, you can't consume tobacco or cannabis on restaurant or bar patios. That's essentially if it's an outdoor area, which is next to or is served with or allows you to eat food on there. You can't smoke, I should say, smoke or vape cannabis or.
That's interesting though, because on one hand you have that limitation, but on the other hand, you just said that you can consume cannabis outdoors wherever you can smoke cigarettes.
Yeah.
So
it's a very. We like to make compromises in Canada. We have a phrase, as Canadian as possible under the circumstances.
Okay.
There was a radio contest a while ago, not related to cannabis, and I think this was a long time ago, where there's you had to finish the phrase, contest for finishing the phrase, and so the phrase started as Canadian as, and then someone submitted as Canadian as possible under the circumstances, and it just seemed like such a circumspect but Canadian way to.
You ever seen those? Online Facebook or YouTube shorts, like the most Denver, Colorado man in the world, or the most Australian man in the world. They need to make a Canada one.
Well, we had a very big ad campaign. This was 15 years ago now, called I Am Canadian.
Okay.
There was this person named Joe Canada, I think. He goes up on a stage and
saying, Joe Canada. I remember him. Yeah. I remember that.
And so, and he actually did a remake of it not too long ago. I don't think the remake was associated with the beer company, but it was, we're patriotic in Canada, and, we hear these calls for 51st state, and I think people hear and think, oh, this is a joke. But people in Canada, they say, well, we don't know if it's a joke, so we're going to take it seriously. And elbows up, we have this elbows up movement. It's a hockey term. And so we take our sovereignty seriously in Canada. But, when it comes to cannabis, we're proud to have the system we have. There are definitely wrinkles in it, things that can be improved upon. But it is a model that really the states and the federal government should look to, especially if public health and safety is paramount, which I think all lawmakers would say it is. Let's end the divide between cannabis and intoxicating hemp. Let's let's create a robust. Well, I mean, maybe you wouldn't say that because your clients are intoxicating hemp companies, but I presume many of your clients, if they had a choice to take part in, it doesn't matter what it's called, if it's an industry that's regulated well, allows them to operate with the freedom that they want, and everyone's happy, that they would be happy with that.
Yeah, a lot of my clients are it's a broad range between hemp consumables, but because I got into the cannabis industry through the healthcare side, I just entered in my 19th year of practice, but historically I came out of the M&A healthcare regulatory side, and that's how I fell into cannabis. So a lot of my work has stemmed still on very much on the healthcare side and medical side. And, as you may know, there's talks about rescheduling, and if that does reschedule, what does that mean with FDA approvals? And if you have FDA approvals, does that trickle down into cannabinoid-based products that ends up in retail pharmacies,
right?
And if it's in retail pharmacies, can you then prescribe? And if you prescribe, then how does that affect the DEA registration for physicians, and so forth and so forth? So help as we wrap up. Where can people find you, and what events do you typically attend? Is it here in the U.S.? Is it mostly in Canada? If somebody wanted to contact you and needed help in Canada, where could they find you?
Yeah, so my website is substancelaw.com. My email is harrison@substancelaw.com. I enjoy being on LinkedIn and making posts on LinkedIn. There's a vibrant community of the Canadian cannabis industry. It's a small industry, you could say. Everyone knows each other, sees each other at events, and LinkedIn is one of those.
But yet, being the second largest country in the world.
Yeah, but it's a large country, but it's also a small country, and you bump into people a lot more often than you think that you'd know. And so find me on LinkedIn, and there are some events every year that are really must-see events. So one of them is called Grow Up.
Okay.
And it is, I don't know how they came up with the name, but I think it's a take on Grow Up. And also, as an industry, we're growing up.
Yeah.
And so that is a conference that's held every year, actually multiple times a year in different cities, but each year in Toronto. And so I usually try to go to that. That's a very good conference.
Yeah. Do you ever have any cross-border issues with the U.S.? Because many years ago, this is probably, I want to say maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I was a partner at a global law firm called DLA Piper, and I worked closely with our Canadian counterparts. And there were always some cross-border issues between Canada and U.S. I'm just wondering, do you have any U.S. clients that forces you to come here to do some cross-border issues?
Yeah, so I don't, I'll be straight. I don't do any U.S. Matters. So I don't have any business interests or any clients or anything in the United States. But certainly as individuals, if you consumed cannabis in Canada before legalization, or you were ever charged with an offense, that could make it very difficult to go across the border. I think the CPB, after legalization, had a policy. They came out and said, okay, well, if you're a Canadian and your business interests are solely in Canada, and what you're doing in Canada is not illegal, and you only consumed cannabis, after it was legal for you to do so in Canada, generally you're not going to be admissible to the U.S.
Got it.
But if you have investments in the U.S., like if you're coming to the U.S. to see a facility that you're investing in or wanting to invest in, there's a case of an investor who was told, we're not going to let you in, and he was not, he was not coming to the U.S. to do anything nefarious. And so, hopefully that gets changed over time. But that is an unfortunate effect of the fact that federally it's not legal in the U.S.
Yeah.
and in Canada it is.
Right. Well, hey, Harrison, it's been wonderful talking to you.
Oh, this
I've
has
never
been
had a
amazing, Richard.
Canadian guest on here. This is officially episode 34 is dedicated to Canada. And so
Amazing.
I appreciate you reaching out, and it was great talking to you.
You as well. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks.